This is the special episode part 2. This is on energy. When you think of that, you get several things in your head, but particularly today we are focusing on nuclear energy because it's been a hot topic, but at the same time, what everyone is doing or people don't know where goes what and why are we doing this. So first of all, the story started with GPUs consume a lot of power and AI is not running out of GPUs. It's basically running out of watts. Data centers hitting the grid limits, the founders who win are the wiring reactors to rack, signing the first PPAs kind of agreements, purchase price agreements, and locking rare earth magnets that keep fans and pumps moving. Today, I'll break down how exactly do it. No hype, just playbooks. I'm Revant. We turn frontier infrastructure founder-ready plans you can start this quarter for this episode. And quick note, I'll mention some public companies, tickers. This is not an investment advice. Ready? So where does the grid breaks? Let's start with something simple. In biggest data center metros, bottleneck is not land, buildings, it's getting continuous power that actually shows up your GPUs do. Utilities are seeing request volumes that used to take a decade arrive in a year. Interconnects, timeline stretch, capacity prices pop because there is always demand for energy and demand charges are punish any schedule mistake. And I also feel like how this AI power consumption is also increasing people's prices on their electricity. Of course, it does. And if you run a 300 to 500 megawatt campus, maybe Horkel deals firm is the new currency, which takes us to two new playbooks. Let's call it Playbook 1, brownfield nuclear and data centers. It's basically you co-locate operational nuclear plant, understand why it works, like transmission capacity, how much water access it has, industrial zoning, and counterparty that is already running with gigawatts. Think of it as a direct wire adjacent. You still follow the market rules, but the physics and the paperwork line up faster. And here is how founders make this real. Site ordination, which is basically like assembles options on parcels near existing reactors, like check for water, EMF setbacks, and is there a room for substations actually? And can we reuse the heat in somehow? So that we keep on generating power. Let's see in the real world who are doing what of this. Who are the real world actors for this? Guess. So there are a few companies like called Constellation with called CEG, it's basically largest nuclear fleet. And there is one more company called Talon who focuses on developing nuclear adjacent campuses and hyperscalers. These are users as companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, the natural off-takers. The outcome, what do you think the outcome would be? Like investing this much into nuclear. We do save a lot on power delivery. And since this is happening near a data center or we are dedicating something that for a data center, it can be always allocated power. And also you can contract it if data centers are not using, you can contract it. And it's very low carbon on megawatt usage. That basically buys time. There are two things important in the world, time and speed. So remember that. Let's take how we are going to implement, what technology we are going to use in Fission. So for this, applications, SMRs, small modular reactors, and advanced fission for computing. So these are the two things. One is fusion and other is fission. So where are we at and who are focusing on what? And in the near term, which companies, where is it? Again, this is not investment advice. This is just giving you idea on who's doing what. GE, the Hitachi one, BWRX via GE Vernova, NYC, remove the NYC. So let's go back. So the first company is, let's talk with GE Hitachi, and which is doing through GE Vernova, and GEV is the ticker symbol. It's listed in NASDAQ. So they have multi-unit programs, advancing good match, 300 megawatt for class campuses, and Westinghouse AP300. So Westinghouse is kind of private, and their actual owners are BEP and BEPC and CCG. It is targeting like almost 300 megawatt of power with 80,000 pedigree. They're still early data center MOUs in Europe. Haltech SMR. It is a private company but partnered with Hyundai. Their strategies include like adding SMRs to existing nuclear sites. It reminds me of one more company in Sweden that they also do the same thing, like upgrading SMRs to existing nuclear plants. And it's still private company, but they recently had a partnership with Okla. And next is Rolls-Royce. Was the huge car company is focusing on nuclear energy. What do you guys think? So Rolls-Royce not only just make cars, it makes jet engines. Also, they started working on energy for almost a decade. They want to build big units for hyperscale clusters, like for Google and all. And there are other companies called NewScale Voyager, which works on certificated design, building commercial pipeline infrastructure, basically. High temp and fast spectrum. When you think of that, you should also think like what would happen in higher temperature, what companies can help you with the heat and the flexibility. So how are we channeling the heat? So let's start. The first company that comes into my mind is XE Energy and XE100, which is high grade steam plus power, which is good for cooling and heat reuse. So they're focusing on that. And TerraPower Natrium, they're fast, but they're using a little bit unconventional method. They're using molten salt storage. It could be firm as well as in one package. You said flexibility and industrial heat. Why does this come? So let's start with TerraPower Natrium. So they focus on advanced nuclear reactor system. They are developed by TerraPower, and it's a sodium cooled fast reactor. So basically, liquid sodium is used as a coolant rather than water, and it has molten salt energy storage system. So it can both generate a steady power and ramp up output when needed because water turns into steam. This could give us 345 megawatt, which can also boost up to 500 megawatt for several hours because we are storing energy in molten salt energy storage system. And it uses more advanced nuclear fuel type, which is called high assay low enriched uranium. How do we use this SMRs, Revant? For founders, SMR angle wins because it's nuclear ready campus design. And there are some companies that I've seen, basically, they're trying to keep SMRs that are almost the size of 2 to 3 trucks, where previously the nuclear energy plant was way, way bigger than that. And how incredible that is to bring small reactors. And I just feel fascinated. And you basically are, as a founder, you're selling electrical thermal loops for heat reuse, security and licensing playbooks, contracts. So that's where you can make money, I think. And that bridges fork to knock. You can be paid as owner's engineer now with options to take equity in projects later. Let's start with rare earths. Now, most people actually miss as rare earth magnets. Every fan, pump, high efficiency motor in your data center depends on this rare earth magnets. Neodymium and ferrous boron magnets reinforced with prosium and terbium for higher temperature. The same magnets that turn wind turbines feeding the grid. And if you think of what does it take to from mining building these motors, first you mine, concentrate, separation, you do separate oxides, and from that you extract the metal, and from then you can make the magnets, and from that you can make motors, which basically cools the SMR or data centers as well. Currently, where are people risking their lives? One, getting the highest purity ones, and diasporium and terbium availability and their logistics of shipment. Because these are nuclear and radioactive, so what do you guys think? How can transplant all at one time? And aren't there any potential threats or no? So there is complexities, but people are working their way. It does not affect any other So like example, MP materials like US Mine, they also focus on oxides and magnet plant. They also have a magnet plant. And Linus, it's a non-China neodymium peer at a scale. Iluka, it's a nice name. Heavy on refinery build to backbone, diasporium and terbium. And Neo Performance Materials, again, Europe's largest magnetic plant, and Energy Fuels, UUU. They focus on monzonite to get NdPr oxides in the US and Solvay, which is in Brussels. And they focus on EU magnet oxide lines. So what founders do is spin up magnetic assurance program, get neodymium PR or diasporium terbium with certified specs, pair with motor OEMs, chillers, pumps, you can offer recycling credits, sell it as schedule insurance for mega projects. So this is also a huge opportunity. And for a brownfield nuclear that goes into, okay, let's think this. Now we have designed the nuclear plant. Now we have designed the technologies, magnets, everything. What are there in the other requirements? So for nuclear plants to data centers, nuclear plants to data centers, baseboard blocks with firmness attributes, which basically can lead to penalties and curtailment rules explicitly defined, which are explicitly defined. Who pays for these baseboard blocks? Which basically avoids delays in demand charge paying, um, captures a firm power premium in tight nodes, supports ESG and carbon goals. And for SMRs, folk reality, currently you have to keep a lot of money to get energy out of it. And value is schedule certainty so that these data centers will not suffer from power, or it will have a dedicated power and people have their own dedicated power and everything balances out, which is good, right? Behind the meter setting and heat reusing economies, you have to think of all this. And as a founder revenue now, since you're working with owners and you're basically are having like an engineer, you took a equity retainers and development fees and promoting NTP and COD, either NTP or COD for fusion structure. Like think pilot offtake with milestones, milestone gate with price option value is not just LCOE. And for magnets, supply, spec enforcement, recycling, magnets are where margin lives and versus the raw ore. And it's basically like a finished product, but it's an intermediate product where you're selling to motor makers and all those things. If you execute SMR, advanced nuclear integrations, can look like 15 to 25% businesses at scale. You can take developer equity, which can hit 20s with promotions, 20% equity in promotions. Magnet Assurance has product plus service margins. Fusion, think of it as a upside exposure, not a base case. Finally, the three founder plays that you should consider in the quarter that you're thinking. First, nuclear ready campus integrator, basically development sites, site options, reactors, interconnect studies, heat reuse, skid, and licensing playbook. SMR and data centers, reference architect. Now, we think of standard campus blueprints, and when we think of that, we think of all the other companies like BWRX 3000, AP 300, Xeon 100, Kairos, Natrium, thermal loops, control, security, and owner's engineer as a owner's engineer as well. Here you can have an outcome money through design licenses and retainers, converting that EPC risk share, and magnet assurance for data centers. So this is essential as well because you need to have allocations of rare earths, traceability of QA traceability, motor or chiller vendor integration, recycling rebates, and where you can take have the revenue is take or pay supply. And since it's a regular power consumption, so you could do a membership as well for big companies. What we haven't talked is, and every founder overlooks, is thermal energy storage with nuclear follow load without cycling the core, and water and setting constraints. We have not talked about that. So you have to consider those as well, intake and outfall rights. Basically, like when you're taking ton of water, which can kill the deal because you're not being preparing this water to give it to people and ton of fresh water. So you have to think of that as well, where you can set up the plant and where it does not affect environment, people living there, and everything. And the next thing is insurance and surety. So what they do is they demand first nuclear adjacent campuses and cyber, like direct wire behind the meter layout, which adds obligations, and workforce and QA, operators, RAD Pro, QA, and vendor audit trails. If you got permitted parcel for a reactor or substation with room to breathe, I want to see it because I'm excited. If you built motors, chillers, or magnet recycling, I want to see your specs, and you can DM me your one pager, um, site interconnector, connect status, thermal plan, and who signs the PPA. Yeah, the exciting world we are living in. And the winners won't choose between nuclear, SMRs, fusion, or magnets. They stitch all of them together into a solid concrete plan. I'm Revant. This is Founders Decoded. I hope this information is useful to at least one of you guys. And peace.